Welcome to Birding on a Budget, Fantastic Birds and Where to Find Them, Bird Week 2022.
All right, so we're going to go ahead and get started. First, we'll go through a little bit of introductions, both myself and Madeleine. We'll go a little bit over what Houston Audubon is and YPAC, which is an organization that we're affiliated with through Houston Audubon. We'll give a little bit of background and history on Bird Week, and go through today's plans, which is an introduction to birding, some helpful tools to get you into the hobby of birding, and then how to get involved, followed by some Q&A. So I'm Alex Kneubehl. I am a YPAC member, which is the Young Professionals Advisory Council for Houston Audubon, and I'm this year's Bird Week Committee Chair. And then Madeleine Chaisson?
Chaisson. Yes, Madeleine Chaisson. I'm also a YPAC member.
All right. So we'll go ahead and launch right into it. So Houston Audubon is a great organization. In Houston, its mission is to advance the conservation of birds and positively impact their supporting environments. And so it does that by managing 17 nature sanctuaries in the Houston-Galveston region, among many outreach events, as well as a native plant nursery and other ventures. It manages over 4,100 acres of protected land, including nesting islands in the Gulf Coast region. And it's a nonprofit 501c3 organization. This is important because the Gulf Coast region is part of the Central Flyway, which supports billions of birds on their migratory routes, and includes some 500 species of birds that migrate both during the spring and the fall migrations, and also helps to support the residential birds down here. And so we included a link that you can go ahead and check out Houston Audubon. And there's a lot of different events that Houston Audubon hosts year-round for both family events, kid events, and there's some really interesting photography events. They're also really cool to check out. So definitely a really interesting link and organization to affiliate with. So we're going to put in a plug for the Young Professionals Advisory Council, which is also known as YPAC. So you can learn a little bit more about the work we do, the members that we have, and we are going to be taking applications to process this fall, and they can be found at the link shown here. And so the goal of the Houston Audubon's YPAC is to engage the next generation of conservationists from a variety of different backgrounds. So we have some people in oil and gas industry, we have some people in the nonprofit sector, we have other people in the med center, and so it's a lot of different professions that come together in the spirit of conservation. And it's to build awareness for Houston Audubon's mission among young professionals. And so this is kind of the opportunity that Houston Audubon gives us to make a significant impact in the world of birding conservation in a really important region for migration in North America. And so Bird Week's history. So Bird Week was born in 2019, the same time that our YPAC was born, and it was an initiative put together by the founding YPAC group. And so in 2019, we started YPAC, and then since then we've had really successful years each year. So in 2020, we went virtual because of COVID, but that also gave us some really interesting opportunities to kind of go global, and that we started through our virtual events, reached a lot of different countries and people in different regions of the world. So 2021, we said Bird Week spread its wings, and so we have here some kind of an impact by the numbers. That we had over 1,700 participants in our in-person events. We had 39 different events, and altogether we reached around 47,000 people across Houston and the world. And we had 21 different partner organizations, and it was also the launch last year of our photo contest, which was really successful. We had 258 photos submitted to that. And this year, we don't have the numbers yet for our photo contest, but it also has been equally successful, and so we're really proud about those initiatives. So we're going to kind of start diving into the birding aspect of this. So really, if you think about how many birds that you've seen in a day, as soon as you walk outside, you're already starting to hear birds, whether it's a dove, blue jay, mockingbirds, which are everywhere. It depends if it's later in the afternoon or the evening, then you'll start hearing the nighthawks. So this is one of those things that until you really kind of slow down and take stock of your surroundings, then you'll start picking out, like, oh, actually, you see quite a few birds, quite a few species in a day, just even in an urban setting. So you got to think about what they were doing and when you saw them, and then if you start to get into birding, you can start putting these behaviors to the bird, and then you start researching the bird, and you start figuring out, okay, yeah, so nighthawks come out towards the evening, and then they'll start flying around where the nighthawk comes from. But during the day, these guys are going to be roosting, and then they're sometimes easier to find during the day. And then what you notice about how the bird looks, so depending on which migration you're hitting them in, so if you're hitting them in fall migration, the birds will look different than in spring migration. So things are molting, so they can have different, so it's like wearing different kinds of sets of clothing. So in the fall they'll be a bit more drab, so they're going to be starting to molt in the spring into their breeding plumages, and that's where you'll start to see all the real pretty colors on the warblers. And so as you start to get into birding, again, taking stock of the surroundings, what's going on with the bird, you'll start to notice these really interesting things and how the birds can adapt to their environments in seasons. And so the next step too is trying to figure out, well, what are these called? Identifying these birds. So this is a nighthawk. You can go outside a lot of times with common. There's common birds like blue jays, white-winged doves, also pretty common. So the next step is, the first step of birding is observation. The second step is identification. And so once you start getting into those, I think you can start figuring that out. But fun fact. Houston does have an official bird, so this was an initiative by the YPAC in 2019, and so that bird is the yellow-crowned nighthawk, shown here. And so these are actually pictures taken in Herman Park in the Met Center, and these guys are pretty ubiquitous throughout the city. You'll find them pretty much any time of the day. A lot of times they'll be roosting in trees, or they're running around trying to find either invertebrates or crawdads in the grass. And so we have rolled out our Bird Week logo for the year, and so that is the yellow-crowned nighthawk, because it's the bird of Houston, which has its nice yellow crown seen here in the actual pictures. And so we're really happy with the Bird Week logo. We're really happy to embrace the yellow-crowned nighthawk, which is a bird that pretty much everyone can find throughout the city, and it's pretty, again, ubiquitous in a lot of the different communities. And so another thing to think about is, even through your day-to-day, how many bird references are actually out there. So put a bird on it. So this is kind of like our internal joke. So Portlandia featured an episode where it was just like, put a bird on it, and then that was to enhance it. Edge of 17 by Stevie Nicks. It's a super recognizable kind of bird trivia. So white-winged dove, and then Hope is a Thing with Feathers by Emily Dickinson. And I mean, there's a plethora of different cultural references that incorporate birds, and these are things because people see these, and they're pretty recognizable. So again, today we're going to go through the following questions. What is birding? What are some helpful tools that you can use to get into birding? And then how do I get involved in the Gulf Coast birding community? And then we'll also highlight some of the other Bird Week events that you can attend today too. So birding basics. What is birding? I'm a scientist, so I like definitions. And so birding, you can really boil it down to the identification and observation of wild birds in their natural habitats as a hobby. And so this kind of involves three key components: identification and observation, natural habitats. Believe it or not, the Houston region and Gulf Coast region, including Galveston, is rife with natural habitats for these birds. And it's a hobby. It's supposed to be fun. It's not supposed to be something that's sterile and really bookish. And so I think I personally feel like my life's been enriched by birding, and it's a really interesting and useful hobby. Where can I go birding? So we're really fortunate in the Houston and Gulf Coast region that you can pretty much go anywhere and start seeing birds. There's actually a really interesting book that's entitled like Parking Lot Birding in Texas, and this woman went around into different parking lots and amassed a substantial species list just from birding in parking lots in Texas. So you can pretty much go anywhere and do anything. And who can do birding? And this, I think, is really important. It's anyone and everyone. Pretty much if you have any tangential interest in birds, which I would argue everyone pretty much does, anyone and everyone can do birding. And so there's been huge initiatives recently to really reach out to a lot of different communities to help them get involved in birding, to help them realize the benefits of birding. and then the kind of fun and health benefits too that are from that. So birdability is a great one, and so there's a lot of resources here for ADA compliance of different and accessibility of different birding spots, and so they're a really awesome organization. Black Birders Week is something that is, I think this is their second year, and so they have some really awesome events during that week. Latino Outdoors is a great organization. Patagonia's outdoor organization, so they do some really awesome work. Audubon's Let's Go Birding Together is an initiative during Pride Week, and then Houston's Houston Feminist Bird Club. So that's a national organization with local chapters. And so there's any type of group or community, there's definitely some organizations out there to help bring into the birding group.
And I would say if there's an organization that's not listed or a community that's not specifically included here, that there are those people that are already birding, it might just not be institutionalized. So it was really cool at Black Birders Week, as an example, that came up from people realizing there are black birders, and we need to talk more about the fact that there are black birders. And so really bringing in all of these different conservationists and scientists and just people that were birding to start having events to really kind of engage with folks that maybe otherwise wouldn't have been invited or included or thought that they might even want to be included in birding. So making sure that birding is not this kind of club of very niche, cliquish people. It's really for everyone, because birds are out and they're around, and we can go with them.
And everyone can enjoy and benefit from birding. And the birds can benefit from everyone too. It's a two-way street. So what do I need to break into birding to start birding? Again, so I broke it down into there's three components that at least I think there's three components of birding. So first is observation, and so you can use your eyes. You really don't need anything else. And so that'll get you only so far. So sometimes the birds are pretty far away. Ears, so you're also listening to. And so actually a lot of birders that can really bird by ear and do really well with that, you'll actually probably end up getting a lot more birds than what you see. Binoculars are pretty, I think, would say ubiquitous and kind of canonical equipment for a birder. Spotting scope, depending on what your level of interest in that, but that's for further away birds. Camera, if you really start getting into it and kind of want to get into documentation, that's a little bit more pricey. So the second kind of component is identification, and this is where you can do quite a few different things. So field guides are really handy. I have a link to some field guides from the Houston Public Library System, and so those can be really helpful. Internet access, you can pretty much Google anything anymore and you'll find some answers. And so there's some really awesome and online communities and apps that you can access through the internet that will help with identifying birds. And again, apps that you can have on your phone, and it's amazing what you can do now with identifying birds and sound from the phone. And then documentation. So this is also, I think, kind of important and where some people start getting really carried away. So you can do this with a notebook, just how I saw XYZ species today, and that's just for your own personal edification, or even to start keeping life lists. And so life list is pretty much like a Pokemon kind of list of these are the different birds that I've seen throughout my entire life, and so that can be pretty competitive. So you can buy a life list journal to do that. It has a list of all the recognized species within North America, and you can start checking off and adding little tidbits about when you saw it and what it was doing. And then there are apps for this too that are really great, and Madeleine will talk about a little bit with the eBird and Merlin naturalist. But you don't need every single thing that I've outlined here, but you need some combination of the three, I feel like, to do birding. Documentation is kind of somewhat optional, but definitely observation and identification are important. So some helpful physical tools for the entry-level birding. So observation, we'll talk a little bit about optics. Again, you have your eyes. You can get into binoculars, so a pretty decent starting binocular would be something that's like around an 8 power. So an 8x42 binocular, so it's 8 times magnification. 42 is the size of the barrel. And that's sufficient for most birding. I really recommend people buy refurbished. That's great because you have Amazon renewed products now. They're often cheaper than the brand new products. Also, a shameless plug for this guy. I don't know who runs AA Optics, but that's who I buy from. And so he sells refurbished Vortex brand products, which is a really good brand and product for getting into birding. And these refurbished products maintain their lifetime warranty, which is great. So even though they're refurbished, if there's still something wrong with them, you still can use that lifetime warranty, which I've done in the past, and it's a super easy process. For identification, this is where we could just talk specifically about identification and different resources for that all day long. There are field guides, so I have shown here my go-to field guide, Sibley's, but there are a whole bunch of different ones, and I've included a link here to the Houston Public Library system for the different Sibley field guides. All About Birds is a fantastic online resource. I use it all the time. And so this is a great way to not only learn more about birds and identify birds, but you can find a whole bunch of different information on there. And so I've included that link here. And then there are so many apps now. Merlin's a great one for identification. eBird can be somewhat good for identification, but that one's mostly good for documentation. iNaturalist is great if you have no idea what it is and you put it on there, other people in your area can help identify it. And then there are Facebook communities too that are solely dedicated to either bird identification or just bird, just kind of saying where the birds are at that time, and people are really helpful for identification on there as well. And then documentation can be pretty straightforward. There's the eBird app, which Madeleine will talk about, a notebook that you can get from anywhere, and then lifeless journals. I've included a link here to Cornell's lifeless and diary journal. So how do you get involved? How do you want to get into this area? So Houston Audubon has some really fantastic bird surveys. I'll show a calendar in a little bit. You can start submitting eBird lists, and it helps contribute to community science. So eBird's pretty much a community that people just dump whatever observations they have at the time, and the scientists will actually go through and that helps predict and kind of study migration patterns of different birds, and so that's actually a really powerful tool now. I would highly recommend volunteering with Houston Audubon at the Sanctuaries, and that's a great way to, if you really have no idea what the birds are, if you want to find out quick, it's definitely worth volunteering for. Sanctuary Stewards are an excellent starting point for that. You can sign up for the Houston Audubon newsletter, which is great, and that has a lot of information of how you can get involved in some different events that we have. And you can come to the other Bird Week events that we have throughout the rest of the week. We'll have a little bit more about that later. But, so we have a calendar here. So these are the upcoming bird surveys. And so what is a bird survey? Essentially, it's a bird hike where you go around a specified area and then you collect the observational information, or the observations that you make, and then that gets uploaded to eBird. So there are 14 surveys that are across the Houston area, and they are pretty much all over the city. And so this is a really great way to not only meet some really interesting people and learn from them, and then you can also get to see some really cool birds too. And check out maybe different parks and areas in the city that you haven't been to before. So with that, some just, again, helpful free tools, the Merlin Bird ID, eBird, Birdcast, iNaturalist, and the local birding community. I'll defer now to my colleague for the next set, which is kind of going into these apps.
Yay. Okay, so there were a couple of slides ago, there was a mention of the Sanctuary Steward volunteer opportunity, and that's how I got involved with Houston Audubon. So it's an opportunity to spend some time in the sanctuary, and the sanctuary is a nature preserve. So you're essentially out in nature for a couple of hours talking to people that are also excited to be out in nature for a couple of hours. And odds are, if you see someone with binoculars, they're going to be really excited to talk to you about what they're looking at. So so long as they're not like actively looking at something, or if you can tell kind of by body language if someone wants to talk to you about a bird, but more than likely someone with binoculars is going to be really eager to tell you what they've been seeing.
Or they're just going to tell you.
Or they're going to tell you regardless of
tell
asking. Yes, birders love to talk about birds. So I shamelessly use this app. I think it is the best thing. I think it's really helpful, especially if you're in an area where you have no idea what you're looking at, to try and figure out what it is. Or if the bird has different plumage, or if it's doing something that you've never seen and you're like, I've seen a woodpecker in a tree, but I've never seen a woodpecker on an electrical pole. Is this still a woodpecker? Maybe. And you can tell kind of with this app. So it's on Apple and Android, and it's free in both places. And that is the little logo that you should look for when you go to the App Store. And when you open up the app, it walks you through 5 different questions. So it asks you what size was the bird, what were the main colors, and then of these categories, what was the bird doing? And you can type in your location, or you can use the geo data magical thing where your phone knows where you are. and also the date, because the date and location are really important to know kind of what's passing through, what birds might be there. So when you put all of this information in, it gives you a list, and the list will usually kind of look like that one on the far left, where it will say, is this your bird? And it gives you some options. And what's really cool about it is if you click on each of the different ones listed, it will show you multiple pictures of what does a male bird look like, what does a female bird look like, what do different kind of life stages of juvenile birds look like, usually with their wings open, with them perched, so it's lots of different angles to be able to kind of figure out what it is that you're looking at. It also shows all the different songs. So this is very cool because if you're out in the woods and you hear a bird, but it's really difficult to mimic a bird sound when you're trying to describe to someone the bird sound that you heard. So if you're kind of playing around to figure out what birds you might have seen, you can play these different recordings out loud so that you can compare it for yourself to what you're hearing. There's a whole niche of birding where people get really into the visualization of bird calls. So if you're into audio or into anything that relates to what you're seeing here, there are people for you in the birding world. And then once you open it and you decide, okay, this is what I think I'm seeing, it gives you more of a description. So that's also really nice because it makes it all more accessible, so that if you are looking at the image, you also have words that are describing what it is that you're seeing. And then once you've identified it, you can kind of play around with how you want to save that information. So you can either share it to eBird, which I'll explain more in a moment. You can also save it within the app. It makes your life list, which is all the birds you've seen in your life, in a list. And you also can just know that you identified a bird and move forward. You don't actually have to track it anywhere. It's up to you. This sound ID feature is very new. People have a lot of thoughts about it. What's cool is that you can be walking around with a phone and you push the record button and it gives you this where it says listening for birds. And then it will hear the bird sound, and then it creates a visualization of the sound that bird is making, and that's the way that the software matches the bird sound. There's a really excellent YouTube explanation on how they built this app. It's very cool. So if you're an engineer, you're into computer programming, people are here for you. And if you hear multiple birds, so if there's lots happening and you're hearing a lot of different things, whatever bird sound is the most, I guess, the most visible or the most easy for the app to hear, it will light up. So in this example, if a yellow-throated warbler is singing, then this would be flashing at you to know that that sound and that visualization is the yellow-throated warbler. So it's really well thought out to make it so that you can kind of approach it from whatever angle works best.
And what's cool about this too is that say you do, well, as it's recording, it's collecting all the metadata too, so like the time location and all that stuff. But then say you have the recording at the end, you can actually, it'll have the list of all the birds that it's seen. You can click on it and it'll take you into the spectrogram of where you saw, or like when it identified that bird.
What?
So it's
I'm learning also.
It is pretty nifty, but also new, and I would caution that it is not always accurate.
No. And that is a good point, because the thing that's tricky, and this kind of gets into like the details of taxonomy, which is not exactly what we're here to talk about, because I am not a taxonomist, but so I am not versed in the names of birds or how to categorize them. That's not something that I'm here as a hobby. But there are other people that would love to answer your questions. What can be confusing is that because Houston is situated on multiple flyways, sometimes there are birds that are passing through that maybe didn't evolve here, or they have not historically passed through ever before. So an example of my own is that when I first moved to Houston, I started seeing these birds that had this kind of funny sound, and they looked like cardinals, but they were black. And I could not figure out what they were. And it took posting on Reddit, posting on Facebook groups, and it was a red-vented bulbul. And red-vented bulbuls, there's a community of them that live kind of in the Houston Heights area, and they are not endemic to Houston, which means they did not evolve to live in this area. They're from a different part of the world, but they are here now, and the science hasn't quite caught up for us to count them as living in Houston. So if you try to identify a bird on Merlin Bird ID and you can't find what it is, you're probably not wrong. It might just be something else that isn't traditionally here, and therefore the app doesn't have it categorized. So that's why those Facebook communities and some other kind of more just interfacing with other people and other birders can be really helpful. Okay, so you figured out what the bird is, now what do you do? So eBird is a really cool platform that's also through Cornell, and you can access it through an app that looks like that. That's the logo, or you can access it on a computer or a desktop website. And essentially what eBird does is it's a platform for you to be able to count the types of birds that you're seeing and share your bird list with other people. And so that's part of what we call community science, because the community is out counting birds, doing bird surveys, identifying them, and then sharing via this platform where other scientists that are actually scientists can go in and say, something weird is happening, everyone is seeing red-vented bulbuls, this must be a thing that we need to investigate. The other way you can use it is if you're really into birding and there's one bird that you just haven't been able to cross off of your list, you can check out all of the different maps. So that far left one is one way to do it on the different screenshots that are here. You can look at the what's called hotspots and see what birds are showing up in that location and kind of look and see like, oh, there's a red-vented bulbul. I have no idea what this person is talking about. I would like to see one. And you can go to that area and odds are there will be a red-vented bulbul or whatever bird is on that list. So this is kind of like bird social media, who's where, what's going on, where should I go to see the birds? And it can be helpful if you're traveling or you don't really know where to start. This can be a really great way to kind of figure out where other people are going and birding and what birds might be showing up. Oh yes, okay, great. So this is a better image of the map I was describing. So I also used this when I first moved to Houston to figure out where are people going and where are the birds. And what's neat is that you can see kind of, it's tricky because species observed, this is really tracking the number of observations that are recorded. So it could be that one of these like blue ticks has 500 plus species, but no one's there reporting them. So you kind of have to take it all with a little bit of a grain of salt, but when you see the red areas, that means that not only are there lots of different types of birds there, but there are lots of people there looking at those birds. So if you're looking to meet other birders or you have questions, you're just trying to get engaged, that finding one of these red spots would be helpful because odds are there's going to be a lot of people walking around with binoculars, like looking up and looking at trees and kind of doing things that look kind of silly. So that's a good way to find them. And then when you click on any of those pins, this is what it shows you. So you can see the number of species that have been seen, the number of checklists that have been submitted, and you can do lots of other cool stuff with data, just depending on what kind of question you're trying to answer. Okay, Birdcast. This is also just super cool that we can do this. It's like weather forecast, but birds. And so there are all of these sensors, I think is the way that it's tracked. And
It's
also
through the normal radar, like from like.
Okay, I don't
I
have no idea.
This is a relatively new app, kind of just I think initiative in general. So they've been collecting a lot of radar data and correlating that with bird activities. And so now they're actually able to track how many birds are moving through at the county level in a lot of different areas. And so this is really awesome because you can drill down and say, okay, in my county last night, how many birds were flying through? And usually it's in like the millions. So if we look here, this is the night of September 20th. 405 million birds were predicted to be moving through. There's been some other kind of follow-ups to kind of validate these data sets, and it's actually been pretty close. It's within at least like 10 to 20%, which when we're talking millions of birds is pretty impressive.
Yeah.
And so it's a really interesting initiative that's taken off, and it's only going to get better. And so this is really awesome information to really follow up with other initiatives like Lights Out Houston, which is when these birds are migrating, trying to limit light pollution so that the birds don't come down prematurely or get drawn into cities where then there's a lot of different risk factors for them that really could die or have other issues during migration. So these are really great to help predict when it would be most effective for this kind of initiatives. So a really interesting program.
Yeah. So I did not know most of that. That's very cool. When you go to the website, it looks like a regular weather forecast where all of this is moving and you can kind of see the direction that birds are going. So it's also kind of fun if you get into birding in Houston and then you know someone else that's birding, you know, in New York, you can kind of see like, ooh, the cloud of birds, they just passed over Houston, they're coming to you, and you can kind of decide where to go and kind of who to reach out to. So it's just another neat way to stay engaged.
Yeah, birding is really going big data. There's a lot of different programs and different initiatives that are out there that are really collecting a lot of this data that will ultimately help both birding as a hobby so that you can better identify where birds are going to be, but ultimately it's really the conservation efforts that are really going to improve from this and different initiatives in those spaces.
Okay, so Birdcast was a website. iNaturalist is another app, and it also has a website component. This is beyond birds. So this is, you can use it for birds, but when you start kind of playing around on it, you'll realize it's a lot of people using it for plants, animals that are not birds, because birds get just, there's so much data and they're so cool, they get a lot of attention. So this is an app that kind of helps to fill in some of the gaps. So when you open it, you'll see a couple of different things. There's some really good tutorials on their website of how to use it, because this app does like 5,000 different things. It's kind of tricky to understand exactly all the moving pieces. At least it was for me when I was trying to learn. So this is two different screenshots. This first one is a map, and so what you can do is based on your location, you can see what other people are seeing. So if you're outside and you keep seeing this one slug, you're like, I've only seen this one kind of slug, what's going on? You can look around and see, oh, other people are seeing this type of slug. And then if you get really curious, you can kind of look up and see what birds are eating this slug and kind of going from there. So a way to also interact with this is if you take a photo of something, you don't know what it is, you can text it to your birder friend, they might know, and then you can also upload it onto this app, and there are different privacy settings that you can explore. You can upload it onto this app, and then AI, so the software within the app will suggest to you what it thinks it might be and offer you a couple of different names, both common names, so we would normally call something, and also their scientific Latin name. And then you can say, okay, I think it's this type of slug, I'm not really sure, let's see what happens. So you choose the name that you think is the closest, and then other people that are super into slugs will come in and say, actually, it's this type, and then people will comment and kind of add their identification. And then once there are, I believe, 3 identifications and kind of everyone agrees, then it becomes research grade. And then what can happen from there is that you're also contributing to community science, similar to eBird, where people that maybe are studying slugs, because I'm stuck on this slug example, people that may be studying that species can then go onto iNaturalist and see, you know, me and all of my friends in my neighborhood keep seeing this slug. If I'm a slug scientist, I should go to that neighborhood and see what's going on. So it's a really nice way to kind of share with one another and also to help you figure out what it is that you're seeing.
And there are also some really cool initiatives like the BioBlitzes and stuff like that, where that will leverage iNaturalist and kind of the biodiversity data that's collected. So how many different species, what kinds of different species are found. And Houston does really well with the BioBlitzes. Like internationally, I think it's in the top 10, like one of the top 10 cities. And so there's some really cool stuff to look into iNaturalist too. Again, outside of birds. And I think birding is like a fantastic opportunity. So once you start recognizing like, oh, okay, the birds are there. Well, what are the birds eating? Oh, they're eating this certain type of, fruit, or they're eating a certain type of bug. Oh, what's that? It's a cool bug. And then you start to like really go out the ecosystem, and then you start like, oh, okay, now I'm interested in everything. And this iNaturalist comes in where it's a great opportunity to start documenting all those things. And you think in the beginning, you're like, I'm not going to document, I'm just going to go see the birds. And then like at the very end, you're like the most diehard like life listener, where it's like you're, really, oh, I got to check off all these boxes. Oh, I got to go here and get this bird.
Your whole camera roll is slugs.
Yeah. And then you're an addict, and I've met so many people. It's like I just got tangentially interested in birding, and then now I'm the most hardcore birders. So it is a slippery slope. So we'll go ahead and kind of put in a pitch for Bird Week. So the QR code will link out to this list of events here for the rest of the week. And so we have some really awesome stuff all over the city. We really tried to do a good job of reaching out to partners all over Houston and down into Galveston to really make it known that you can be anywhere in the city, in your backyard, and you can do some really cool birding. And this is a great opportunity to interact with different partner organizations that we have down at the bottom here, and meet some really awesome people and start making those connections and becoming part of the Houston birding community, which I would argue is one of the best.
Yeah.
We're pretty awesome.
Yeah. I have found, not that I'm like the most professional birder, but if I don't walk outside and immediately see 5 species, I'm not interested, because I've been so spoiled birding in Houston because the biodiversity is wild. So you go to cities where people are like, it's the place to bird. Like, can we beat Houston? No. So it's a pretty exciting place to be.
Yeah, and I the people that bird in the area too are super welcoming, and you know, it's just a great place. Really fortunate, especially too being the Central Flagler. And so with that,
yeah, we're going to take some Q&A.
We're going to take some Q&A, but we're recording, so
yeah.
If you have any questions, shoot us an email at birdweek@houstonaudubon.org, or comments, concerns, and we'll take those from there. Thanks for your time.
Woohoo! Thanks.